these were all things that they had considered at the time that they adopted the Bill of Rights. And so that compromise already happened. Ever since then, it's been an infringement. And what we're working to do is actively working to restore.
Hello, how are we, guys?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. We have special guests today. We're doing a little easygoing show down in San Antonio. Today we have Mike from Sons of Liberty. Welcome back. Number 2, right?
Yes, second one, man. Not a lot of fun the first time.
This is a good show. And then we have Adam from FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition, which is one of the premier leaders, I believe, in the 2A space and defending our constitutional and God-given rights. So thanks for coming on, man.
Well, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, I want to deep dive. So I've known you guys now for, how long have you been talking with FPC, Mike?
For a couple of years now. I mean, FPC is the premier firearms rights organization that we lean towards, So everybody knows we're pretty outspoken about stuff. So these are the pit bulls, I think, in the industry.
Yeah, it's been at least 3-4 years, I'd say, since you and I started talking. I've been there about 3 years, so I want to say it's about the time I came on, you and I started having conversations, and maybe yours predates that with the organization.
Yeah.
So how did you guys kind of start? Who founded it? Why? And then can you just kind of, if you have a little history of just what you guys do to kind of educate the audience, it'd be awesome.
Absolutely. So FPC started in 2013. It was a couple guys that were not very happy with how the gun groups in California were handling things in California. And, they sat down in a garage and said, we can do it better. So it started out with some appearances at gun shows, things like that, educating the public. And from there, it really snowballed and built a following and a rapport with these individuals who wanted to be more involved with advocating for people's rights and against oppressive governments. So as time went on, the programs built, the staff built, the public understanding and knowledge of the organization itself built. And I would say around 2017 is where it really started to, more on a national level, become more recognized as
just outside of the state level in California,
as opposed to just being kind of constrained to California. And I started working with FPC as outside counsel back when I was practicing law in private practice around that same timeframe, 2017, somewhere in there. And we represented the organization in the comment in opposition to the bump stock final rule or the proposed rule at the time. And then as far as being counsel for the actual litigation, which is still ongoing at this point, but that was the first lawsuit in the nation challenging that final rule. We filed that a couple hours after it was signed. So, as time went on, it went from California to being more national. More states were being involved in what was being sued or who was being sued, and even the federal government. So it's been an interesting ride in a fairly short period of time.
That should be the tagline: FPC, no one's safe. Everyone gets sued.
Kind of right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you guys kind of came on my map about 2 years ago, and I hadn't heard really anything about it. And then over the course of probably the last year, I've been following you guys and getting educated on what you actually do. And I think Mike and I were kind of talking about that before this, but there's a good place for a lot of other organizations, but their battle plan and is a little different than yours. And I think that we live in a litigious society, so having lawyers that can sue back and do all these things to protect us is absolutely phenomenal, because there's kind of two sections within FPC, right? What are those?
There's more than two, but yeah, you kind of have it broken down. So more broadly speaking, the way I'd say it's broken up currently anyway is you have grassroots advocacy. So us getting our members involved, sending email campaigns, things like that to their representatives. Hey, do this. Hey, don't do that. We have some direct advocacy that we do where we go into states and lobby. So most recently, the permitless carry in Ohio, in Texas, and I'm going to blank on the other states, but there was at least 5 states that we had a direct lobbyist on the ground in those states doing lobbying with the legislature. And then, of course, the thing that we like to talk about is the legal program and all the lawsuits that we do based on, politicians stepping out of line, really, or laws that are on the books that we're looking at going, okay, hey, we can challenge this. Here's a path to success. So I was brought on board to help kind of build out this legal program with 2 other individuals. And that started, COVID happened. It kind of threw things a little out of whack in the sense of we were working on planned litigation, and then all these shutdowns happened. So we went, kind of into overdrive, just suing everybody over the shutdown. So gun stores, ranges, things like that. And then
you weren't suing gun ranges, right?
No. we were suing. Fair clarification. Yeah, no, we were suing governments.
We're suing gun. What?
Yeah,
get off the show, man.
No, we were suing governments for the shutdown and the health orders that did all that stuff. And then after that, kind of, and sheriffs too for not issuing carry permits. That was a big one. So we had, there were sheriffs in North Carolina that were not issuing pistol purchase permits, which you need to purchase a gun, or a carry permit, which was an exception.
Wait, hold on. You need a pistol purchase permit
in North Carolina
to buy a pistol?
Yes.
What? Mm-hmm. Okay. I didn't know that. Sorry, I live in Texas.
Yeah, you live in a different world, right? So New Jersey, here's another one. They have the same thing. You need a firearms owner ID card to be able to purchase any kind of long gun. And then they have a separate ID card to be able to purchase a pistol. New York, purchase pistol permits. And we'll circle back to this because these are things we're challenging.
Cool.
So you had those, the city of Philadelphia, their gun permit unit. In Pennsylvania, it's the county sheriff that issues it, except for Philadelphia, as far as carry permits are concerned. In Philadelphia, it's the gun permit unit, which is part of the Philadelphia Police Department. They notoriously would delay, deny applications, make it an arduous process. And that was, they shut down their gun permit unit completely at one point for, I want to say it was 2-3 months during COVID, so that nobody could even apply for a license to carry. And the state of Pennsylvania was under a state of emergency. And if you look at our law, the quick synopsis is if you don't have a license to carry, generally you can open carry in Pennsylvania, but under a state of emergency, that's all suspended unless you have a license to carry. So these people were left without an avenue to, utilize their rights. That was another lawsuit we brought during that time. The point where I was trying to drive with this, and I apologize for taking so long to get there, was that after all this COVID stuff happened, we went back to our strategic litigation plan where we had really kind of set the stage as to this is the world we want to live in. These are the chess pieces we think we can move to advance the right in these areas, and started implementing that. So if you look at the areas, and it's on our website, but there were really kind of 4 main areas that are going off the top of my head that I can recall anyway. The first is people's ability to access the right to just be able to purchase arms. So you have purchase purchase permits were being challenged. The types of bearable arms, so the assault weapons ban in California, for instance, and we can come back to that too. 18 to 20 is a very big one for us.
Yeah.
So I volunteered to be a plaintiff on that.
Yeah. So
as far as a commercial operation, that our business is thwarted because we can't service customers in that age range, and so they were. Anyways, the point is these guys. Whenever I describe the FPC, whenever people ask me, hey, how do I get involved? What can I support? I talk about FPC. They are like the way the ACLU used to be whenever it was just a legitimate civil liberties organization. And this just happens to be that y'all's focus is 2A, right? I mean, and it doesn't matter the plaintiff, it doesn't matter that. If it's a 2A violation, if someone is violating somebody's 2A right, regardless of the circumstance, it's not like some political, it's not a left-right kind of thing. It is a legitimate civil liberties thing. These are the assassins, man. These are the guys that go in and get it done. It's awesome.
Yeah, so and you did volunteer for that. So the 18 to 20 stuff is something that's close to home for us because...
Hey, listen, Uncle Sam threw a machine gun and an AR in my hands at 17 years old, so I'm pretty sure you know where I stand on that.
Right. So you have 18 to 20 just general purchase restrictions that a lot of states have been implementing, especially more recently. And then 18 to 20 carry restrictions, same thing, right? Well, if you can't access the right in any capacity, the right is the right to keep and bear arms, not just keep and not just bear. So those were things that we were looking at across the country. The plaintiff stuff, since Mike touched on it, I might as well just run there real fast while I'm thinking about it. The biggest thing in bringing these lawsuits is finding plaintiffs and qualified plaintiffs. So what we'll do is when we identify a lawsuit we want to bring and the jurisdiction in the air and the particular venue we want to bring it in. And so what I mean by that is, say the state of Texas. Here's a really good example, right? Texas 18 to 20 carry, not a permissible thing. So we look at the state of Texas and we say, okay, that's where we want to challenge the law. In federal court, generally speaking, in most states, you have more than one district. Some states, like Delaware, for instance, it's so small, there's only one district. Texas, for instance, there's 4. So you have like the Northern District of Texas, the Southern District, Eastern, Western. Within those districts, you have different divisions because those districts are so huge. So I don't know how many are in the Northern District, but there's at least 4. So when we're looking at stuff, we have to drill down to like, okay, this is the division within the district we want to be in, and then these are the counties where the plaintiffs can come from. So a lot of times this actually constrains where we can find people. And then when you start really 18 to 20 year olds, it becomes more difficult right off the bat because you're 18 to 20 year olds and they're hard to find sometimes.
Right.
So the biggest problem or resource or way people can help us is finding plaintiffs. We screen all of them to make sure they're good to go. But finding plaintiffs is really like everything else. Without a plaintiff, there is no lawsuit. So we can want to do a whole number of things, but if we don't have people that are willing to step up and volunteer to be plaintiffs, it's just a moot point then. So
that's interesting. I had no clue, and that's mainly because you need like a qualified individual to like on their side say why this lawsuit should make sense and why it should.
Or which right of theirs has been violated, right? I mean,
they're the vehicle,
right?
Really.
Exactly. So.
I feel like I'm in a college class right now. I'm loving this.
Hey, school's in. I got all day.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I think at least from my lens, is there's so many. The media spins so many stories. I mean, if we look at what happened yesterday, there was a shooting in Indiana, and none of the headlines that I've been reading discuss in its entirety that at least not some on the right, but a concealed handgun license, legal everything, stopped an active shooter. And it's like, that should be the discussion point around it. Please, Mike.
Well, I was going to say, so I did read Shannon Watts' tweet about this. Did you see this, Adam?
No.
She said that, a mass shooting stopped by a 22-year-old person illegally carrying a gun should not be a victory for the Second Amendment. I believe while he was a legal gun permit holder, I think he was still in a gun-free zone, which thank God he was, dude. Right? I mean, first of all, the idea of a gun-free zone certainly didn't stop the original assailant, right? And thank God that there was somebody there that carried despite that, because that's exactly what stopped the original assailant. But I think the reason why it's a little bit cloudy is because I'm not sure he was supposed to have a gun in that circumstance, but I'm really glad he did.
I don't know the details surrounding it, so I'd be lying if I did. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, like preservation of life should trump all, in my opinion. Now, it's not a legal opinion, just so everybody's clear, right? Like laws
You're
are
such
laws.
a lawyer. I love it.
Yeah, no,
I just say whatever comes to my head, and half the time it's fucking stupid.
It depends, right?
Yeah.
And that's. There's the $1 million thing, like people who say, I'm going to carry in a place where it's illegal for me to do so. Well, like if you take an informed approach to it, like that's a risk you take of, what happens if you wake up in the back of an ambulance? You weren't expecting to be in that car accident, but now you're in the hospital and now you're looking at jail time. Like, and everybody makes choices, right, wrong, or otherwise. And I'm not here to say do one thing or the other, but
a lot of this stuff is at the discretion of that district attorney and stuff too. As I have heard of incidences where somebody absolutely justifiably shot a home intruder, like in New York, and then that homeowner was prosecuted for having an unregistered handgun that was willed to him by his deceased father.
Oh yeah,
that guy I'm pretty sure was successfully prosecuted too. Now the prosecutor could have easily have chosen not to pursue those charges, but this is a real thing.
You look at all the people that go from accidentally, they cross into New Jersey from Pennsylvania, or they carry they have a firearm with them. Some of the people who have gone to New York that, they're permitted in Georgia and they don't know the law, but they think they're doing the right thing. And they disclose, hey, I am carrying a firearm. And the next thing they know, their life's turned upside down because they are being prosecuted for crossing an invisible line. Now, we'll see with the Supreme Court decision, which we can talk about, more, but we'll see with what results of that and the case law that comes from that, how that shifts this paradigm of these invisible lines. And, if you have a permit here, is it good there? So on and so forth.
Yeah, being up there in the Northeast, it's easy to miss your exit and end up in a different state, trying to get back on the highway. And then if you find yourself in New Jersey, each individual hollow point round is a felony. So if you're carrying a weapon that is completely legal in Pennsylvania, and you missed your exit and you had to for 2 seconds end up in Jersey on your way back to turn around, you might have 19 felonies in your magazine.
Well, that's like because I keep up with most of the stuff as much as I can, but I have a busy and active life, and that's what I feel like a lot of this stuff that's trying to get passed. What is this point system? Isn't that there's something about like a point system that they're trying to push? But it's just confusing to even a guy that's in the gun space all the time, whether or not if you put a foregrip on something and then all of a sudden it turns it from a pistol into an AR and I'm a felon. Those for me are just an absolute attacks on law-abiding citizens because it's confusing, and I don't see how that it doesn't save anybody. I'm not going to say I don't see it. Fucking doesn't do anything other than put law-abiding citizens at risk. And to your point, to be like disclosing to a law enforcement officer, "Hey, I have a pistol in here," and then that for some reason you cross state line and now you're a felon, you're going to jail. You're not the father figure in your family anymore. I mean, my God, like,
It's real.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Do you think some of that will be discussed after the Supreme Court decision, or?
So let's talk about the Supreme Court decision. So the Supreme Court, as I think probably everybody watching this probably knows, recently decided a case, New York State Rifle Pistol Association versus Bruin. And that was a case where individuals from New York had applied for carry permits. And New York has this had a requirement, I should say, of good cause. And there's a couple other states that have this. And almost nobody can show that they have good cause. Simply wanting to carry a gun for self-defense is not good cause. And in fact, a lot of these states, even if you could show that there were threats against your life, it wasn't good enough. Like there had to be some immediate thing. And that's how strict they were with these.
Or it was issued by privilege. Like if you knew if you were buddies with the sheriff, or if you were a donor politically, you got to carry. But as far as legitimate,
it wasn't objective. It was completely subjective.
Yes,
correct.
Absolutely.
It was a privilege.
Right. Yeah. And so the Supreme Court said, okay, first of all, they're like, no, we're not doing that. This right does extend outside the home. You can't have this subjective requirement there. The court, in its opinion, did potentially say that, things like training requirements or permitting fees, those probably are constitutional. Remains to be seen, right? What we're going to see is a bunch of these states implementing new regimes to kind of comply with the Supreme Court decision. And we're going to find out through litigation, I suspect, okay, is that permit fee of $150 excessive or is that acceptable? Is 8 hours of training, excessive or acceptable? Where does that line get drawn? And the other really important thing that came out of this decision that I would just want to hit on real quick is since Heller was decided in 2008, the Supreme Court in Heller said the text you need to apply to Second Amendment, or test rather, that you need to apply to Second Amendment cases is the text of the Second Amendment as informed by history and tradition. And so as the years wore on, all of the circuit courts, the court of appeals that are above the trial courts but below the Supreme Court in the federal system, they all, except for one, developed a two-part test. The first part was, does this law implicate your Second Amendment rights? And then if it does, the next thing is, okay, well, what level of scrutiny do we apply? And the real quick breakdown on scrutiny is there's 3 different levels that are generally applied. The lowest level, rational basis, the court said not acceptable, so it was never considered. Strict scrutiny is a really high burden, and the government interest has to be compelling, and the way that they tailor the law has to be very narrow to further that interest. The next level down, which is the level that the court almost always applied, was intermediate scrutiny, and there needs to be a substantial government interest, but that tailoring requirement is much more broad. And so almost always the courts would say, like, yeah, it implicates your Second Amendment rights, but the government has an interest in it's tailored enough to meet constitutional scrutiny. And so, we would bang our heads against the wall going, Supreme Court said text is informed by history and tradition and you're screwing up this test. Well, good news. Court came back in this last decision, said, for the past 13 years, you guys have been screwing this up. It's, the test is text as informed by history and tradition. And what that's going to do is, first of all, with a lot of cases that are currently being litigated, they're going to get remanded back to the courts that they're in, and perhaps back down to the trial court to be analyzed under this lens, which means that the history at the time of the founding is going to be most important, because that's when the time period the court said is how this lens you're viewing it through is. So just because, I don't know, turn of the 20th century, you have a lot of carry restrictions being implemented. The court said that's not relevant. That's not how the people understood the right at the time it was adopted, which is the relevant time frame. So if you want to say that there's this long-standing historical tradition that's been over 100 years, that's all well and good, but it doesn't date back to when we were founded as a country. The other thing is for new challenges, it's going to be great because it's a very seemingly straightforward test, right? And the court said, is there a historical analog that exists at the time of the founding? So for any of the laws that are being challenged, the burden's on the government to show that at the time of the founding, there was a historical analog. Doesn't have to be an identical twin. It's got to be close enough. So I don't know, if we said like alcohol and drinking and possession of firearms. Well, if you can't go back into history and show that there was more than one, like a few laws at the time of the founding that said, like, okay, if you're a drunkard, you can't possess firearms or what have you. Then it's not going to withstand constitutional scrutiny. So really, in theory, it should open up the door for a lot more litigation and a lot more laws being found not to be able to stand.
And so what was the genesis of that, right? Wasn't it because an individual wanted to obtain a firearm to protect themselves, right?
So this case was about two individuals who wanted to carry firearms in New York, and they were denied their permits by the issuing authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then and they just said...
Yeah, I mean, that the court said, to answer your question, fair question. The court said that the permitting process in place by New York is not acceptable with the good cause requirement. What New York has done, what California has done as a result of this, they're working on changing the permitting schemes within their states. And the other thing that they did was they also passed laws or are passing laws that say, okay, these are the areas in which you can carry a firearm.
This is what I wanted to ask you about. This is what I was really happy to have you here to talk to you, ask you. Right now with this, it's clear victory, I think, in the Supreme Court, right? But what New York is doing to respond for my friends up there, they're making it to where businesses have to explicitly invite you to carry a firearm on their premises, which I can tell you does not go over well. You have to explicitly, we want your gun in our shop. Nobody wants to put that sign up, So how do we fight that? How do we address that?
All good questions. So that is in fact what they're doing in New York. New York specifically said pretty much like everywhere is now a sensitive place. And yes, rather than how it is here in Texas, where you have the 30-7 signs, where it says you can't. In New York, it's a permissive. We have to post a sign, and you can. So if you walk into a place that doesn't have that sign, presumably you're in violation of the law. Now, what we're doing is we are currently looking for plaintiffs in New York and in California to challenge any of the new permitting requirements that they're putting up, as well as these sensitive places and signage and things like that. So that's all stuff we're looking at and actively seeking people for.
That's interesting, right? Because it's like a social identifier that people think differently than you, like New York being predominantly liberal. And if there's going to be people that probably don't want to frequent your business because you're obviously pro 2A, it's so weird, like the social implications of a lot of these laws and how they affect, society and cities and all from bottom to top. It's wild.
New York's fascinating because I went to undergrad at SUNY Binghamton, which is just over the Pennsylvania border in upstate New York. Now, mind you, for those that don't know, upstate New York is literally everything north of New York City, which is pretty much the entire landmass of the state, which was an interesting thing to learn in college. Most of the upstaters, they're not super liberal. Like, they like their guns and stuff. And I can remember...
California, not to interrupt, is exactly the same way. I mean, I came from Central California, and then all my cousins in like kind of NorCal. I mean, that's... I can say it, like my cousins and me, we're all like white trash dudes, and they all carry guns and drink Budweiser. And then it's really the coastal cities that tend to, unfortunately vote for the state. And I don't necessarily, maybe you can hit on that later, but it's, LA gets to define what all California does. I think that's
population density.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
But I can remember very, very clearly in college going through the NFA process for my first SBR. And one of my friends in college, it took him longer to get his pistol purchase permit than it did for me to get back my Form 1 from the ATF back then.
Wow.
Yeah. So definitely the dynamics within states are very interesting to watch. So to go back to Mike's question, so those are things we're looking at challenging.
But you need a plaintiff. You need someone to step forward. And
so one of the ways that we put it out on social media. So if you're following us on social media, it's a great place to see it. I guess I'll plug it now.
Please.
So on Instagram, it's @gunpolicy. Same thing on Twitter, Facebook as well, or you can search Firearms Policy Coalition. The other avenue where you can get in touch with us if you're interested in being a plaintiff in some of these lawsuits is we do what we call a civil rights violations hotline. So if you go to 2ahotline.com, you can report what your civil rights violation is, or if you're responding to a plaintiff request. We do monitor that frequently, and we look through. So if you bring up something that maybe isn't what we're actively looking for, but it has there is a public interest in that specific issue that's broad based. We may give you a call and say, "Hey, tell us more about it." And there have been cases we have brought based on people coming into the hotline saying, like, "Hey, I've got this problem," and we take a closer look and go, "Hey, that's a really good vehicle to get this kind of relief for these people."
Right.
Right.
So that is something.
That's not to be confused with operator hotline, where people call me and I talk about red dots and actions on objective. Here, I'm curious, maybe Mike, maybe this is a question for you or Adam, but why have we not, at least on this side, established like statistics that articulate and represent firearm deaths in America? Because it's so miscited throughout, as we all know. But why isn't there like a resource, and I don't know what agency would run it or civilian sector, but defining, law-abiding citizens that save lives or their own lives with firearms, right? Because
there was called the CDC.
Yeah.
The CDC published the data showing that gun ownership probably saved a couple million lives a year. And then they buried those statistics.
Exactly. But there's no open resource now to, like, at least in my mind, I might just be, inept, but to point to that and be like, and I'm not justifying any human loss of life, but like it makes sense. Right? It's defined by statistics. And that's why I get so confused and why I've talked so much shit to anti-2A guys over the years, is because it all seems emotionally based. I mean, my final capstone project for my bachelor's degree was all on gun control. And my even liberal teacher was like, wow, I didn't see that. I'm like, yeah, I'm citing like statistics and facts that have been proven. But everybody just washes that down and wants to focus on hyperbole and incorrect headlines that are swaying emotional. I mean, how do you not feel absolutely terrible when a tragedy happens? It's the worst thing ever. And I think that's the starting point where, like, that's why I carry a gun everywhere, is just save my own life and or other people's. And yeah, I guess I was kind of like a tangent, but it's interesting that we don't have like citable data that supports, the claim when people are like, oh, you guys just want more guns to fix the gun problem. I'm like, the gun, it's not right. You're addressing the wrong issue.
Yeah, I read the David Hogg tweets and they say it in a very smug, condescending way, like, oh, yeah, more guns are going to make us safer. And he used some analogy about sharks or some stupid shit. Yeah, clearly somebody who's very disconnected from truth. And unfortunately, I don't think there is a very good repository of this kind of citable information. But the information is absolutely there. We do have the data. What was interesting about the CDC thing I brought up earlier is that simply the presence of a gun was demonstrated to save lives. Right? You didn't have to actually shoot the assailant. That sometimes presenting the weapon was enough to thwart some kind of attack, right? And it turned out to be, I think, a couple of million uses of defensive weapons per year. That was one of them. The other thing, too, is that most of your people who are your gun control advocates, what I've seen just in my own discussions and travels and battles and whatnot, are really well-intentioned, very poorly informed people. They're not evil people. They're just very poorly informed. I'm talking about the bulk of people who might lean towards some sort of gun control advocacy. But as far as your real champions of gun control, I mean, you're talking about a very small group of highly funded people from like Michael Bloomberg and stuff, right? Yeah.
Right.
But I think we're winning the fight culturally. Wouldn't you say? Don't you think that gun control is less popular today than it's probably ever been?
I saw some recent surveys and studies on things like, assault weapons bans and whatnot. And it seems like public opinion is split or trending towards not favoring those. It's close, and I don't know what it's been in the past, so you'll have to forgive me. I don't, but I think generally speaking, when you're looking, especially generationally, a lot of the younger audience and 18 to 20, perhaps even younger, like they're not super into gun control at all, actually.
They're not super into government control.
Sure, yeah. And I think Matt hit it right on the head earlier when you said it's emotional, and I think that's the biggest disconnect. You can present as many statistics as you want to somebody, but if they're acting based on an emotional impulse and not a logical one, it's not gonna be meaningful to them.
And that's something like I don't know how to phrase this correctly, but when a politician stands on a stage holding an SBR and goes, "This is a ghost gun. You can buy it anywhere and no one knows you have it. It shoots laser-guided death bullets.
I'll take 8.
And it's going to, no, trust me. They're
in production now.
there should be like a legal consequence for fucking lying your ass off to the public. Like there has to be a legal consequence because then if there's no consequence, it's the whole reason.
We'd have no politicians left, by the way.
I know, right? But it's like, I guess it's all a lie, right? Yeah,
well, you have to have a media interest to hold people accountable. Like, like the way we're fact checked, whenever, you say something about the efficacy of a mask, or you say, hey, this thing might have gotten out of a lab. If you say something in the way we're fact checked, perhaps, if there was
the new shirt, fact check politicians like they fact checked us. I see it on Instagram. You start typing in COVID and it's like ding, 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 ding.
Oh yeah, I mean, and a lot of the gun stuff that I've posted has been fact checked. And it's erroneous and it's wrong. But our biggest hurdle, I think, is discourse is so lopsided right now. There's such a monopoly on information in tech companies and stuff to where it's very hard to get that message and that statistics out. It's very hard to have an objective conversation because it is so weighted. That's where I really hope Elon buys Twitter.
Well, he's trying to pull out now, and then Twitter's trying to force him to buy. It's a weird world we live in.
Well, I mean, you're buying a fucking, you're buying a 30% bots or something, right? I mean, it's not exactly they're selling him something. It's a fake Rolex.
Wait, this says Romex on it.
Hopefully in this court case, because I think they are going to try to sue him, right?
Yeah,
but they're going to have to maybe under discovery disclose how much of Twitter is a bot, which I bet you is over 25%, dude.
Yeah, well, Twitter's
indications are.
If that's what your measure of society is, man.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the discourse, though. I'm saying the ability to get information out there and to have these kind of conversations that it's not so weighted. Like if the next time there's a debate panel or you have two talking heads on TV, they're both given equal amount of time, and when one's not shunned or seen as a bad person.
Yeah, but we all know that. I think that we've seen that over the years. It's like a cat in a bathtub, right? Once you come, with a rational viewpoint, you're articulated, you have data that supports your claims, then it's you terrorist, kill it. You ever throw a cat in a bathtub, it does anything to get out. And I think that that's the unfair, conversation that happens is so quickly people like want to think, oh, well, then you want to see innocent lives die. I'm like, the whole intention of carrying a firearm is to save innocent lives. So listen, we're on the same team. I know your objective is to save innocent lives. I want to save innocent lives. You're just going about the wrong way because your way doesn't work. Right? And then, but how do it's like nearly impossible to convince people to sit down and have those conversations because we live in an impulse society that, our attention span is 6 seconds and anything becomes critical thought. You run from it because, oh no, that's hard. Back to TikTok.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right with that. And I think having those more difficult conversations, it requires people to reevaluate or look at their own positions through a different lens, and either the emotional investment's too high or they just don't want to even go through the process. Well, you're just wrong.
Yeah.
Am I though?
Am I? Yeah.
But I've actually read some research on this to where people, even when presented with truly compelling information that's counter to your own belief, people tend to double down on the bad belief. They don't. I think one of the measures of intelligence is how quickly you can change your mind when presented with better information. And unfortunately, you don't really see a lot of that. Yeah. Even when presented with very compelling information, they dig in even deeper, which I'm sure is true on all sides, right? But that just happens to be how it works, you know. So as of right now, I think that can change. I think with more widespread discourse, it
wishful
could
thinking.
Change. Yeah.
Please.
Let me drive the bus here for a moment.
Back
to FPC, but it goes to the discourse thing you're talking about, right? So FPC, part of what has been happening and what we're really trying to do is lead that thought process to get people to be more liberty-minded. The whole purpose of FPC is to create a world of maximal human liberty. And this idea of liberty is lost upon a lot of people. Everybody talks about
liberty
freedom.
should be bipartisan. There should be fuck off all politics. Sorry to interrupt. Like liberty is liberty.
Yeah. And that's the basis of the founding of this country is this idea of liberty. And as time goes on, you see politicians from both sides of the aisle infringing on it in their own way. And to just be very clear, FPC is anti-partisan. It's not bipartisan. It's anti-partisan. Sure. There's no, and so you see it from both sides, and you have people going rah rah, my guy. Well, like your guy is screwing you just in a different way. It might not, and so one of the things we're trying to do is really lead that public thought and discourse into, this is why these things are bad. And I guess that's a good segue to talk about FPC in a different manner. So everybody knows FPC, right? What a lot of people don't know is the foundation side of FPC. And what the difference is. So FPC is like the people's house. It's the we're out there, we're talking to you and stuff. The foundation side of things is where all that legal work is going to be happening now. So we're working on building the law center. We started years ago by bringing certain people on board. We're shifting that program over to the foundation. We're bringing things more in-house. So there's right now Joe Greenlee. He's our director of constitutional studies. A lot of that original research that is going to be useful under the Supreme Court clarifying that, hey, we told you 13 years ago, this is the test. He's doing a lot of that stuff, and that's all going to become very important. So the 18 to 20-year-old stuff, for instance, because we were talking about that earlier, he went back and looked at what was the understanding of the right at the time of adoption and found that, 18 to 20-year-olds were required to bear arms. Right?
You were an old man at 21.
Yeah.
So
there's 14-year-olds fighting the Civil War, dude.
Other interesting things like the right to train. That's another one that's going to be an area where these lawsuits trying to shut down ranges and stuff. Well, when you talk about the Second Amendment, you have courts refer to the core aspect of it, and I really hate talking about it in that context. But if you're going to say there's a core right, well, then there's other ancillary portions that are directly related to that. That being the right to train. What good is keeping and bearing an arm if you have no ability to practice with it, right? To maintain. So he went back and looked at this.
That's more dangerous, by the way.
Yes,
people
absolutely.
need trigger time. They need professional development. They need to learn how to stow their weapon. They need to know how to safe. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're.
It's just crazy because I hate it's like it goes in line with the defund the police movement and shit. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, what are you guys doing? Can you continue?
No, you're fine.
I just can't I'm not the smartest guy, but it's so hard for me to wrap my head around people that they want to shut down ranges for what? What?
Well, because they decided to move in next door and then they don't like the noise.
Well, I remember in Virginia when I went to Lobby Day a couple of years ago, one of the things they were proposing was 2 or 3 people could not gather to take a class.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think
insurgency stuff.
Right,
yeah.
and it was malicious stuff. I'm talking you're talking about a carbine course would have been, my armorer's course would have been illegal in Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah. So the right to train and tracing the historical roots of that was something he did. The right to home build's another one. So looking at through history, was there any regulation on people manufacturing their own arms? Goes directly to the 80% stuff and things like that. So the foundation is where the law center and the representation is going to come from in the future, and we're working on funding the next phase of that. So we just hired Cody Wisniewski as a attorney. He comes from another organization where he has a lot of experience in the APA world. So APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, ATF, it's all right up in that alley. And he's an individual who has a burning desire to partake and really move the needle in Second Amendment litigation. So he was a hire we just made. And there's others that we're looking to follow to really kind of shape the legal strategy, drive more things in-house, and really take things to the next level. And we're really excited about that. So I bring it up just because I think a lot of people, they only know about FPC, the C4, and they don't know about this other side that exists. It's a separate organization, just to be very clear. So while we're getting that out of the way.
Yeah, the foundation. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. What do you guys think about, was it HR 1808? Their assault weapons ban that's kind of get pushed through?
I'll be candid with you. I haven't been following it, but
Okay.
I'd be happy to talk to the policy guys and get you an answer on that.
Yeah. I'd love to see, because I mean, you read up on that, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty gnarly. I mean,
I don't.
it's gnarly.
It's way far. It's very far reaching. It's more significant than the proposal, the actual successful pass in '94.
Okay.
I just don't think the public legitimately has an appetite for that anymore. I could be completely wrong. I might be eating my words here in a couple of weeks, but I just don't, think the public. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to take the fight to them. Like right now, we have to be more aggressive in fighting, right? If we do feel like we have them on the ropes, now's the time to try to finish them off.
Well,
now's when you push.
And
dude.
so we are doing that, by the way. And assault weapons ban is a really good one, right? So we had a case in California. It was called Miller versus Becerra. It's now Miller versus Bonta, because Becerra is now in the Biden administration. And that was a case we won after a trial. It's the only post-trial victory in the United States against an assault weapons ban. The only one. That's currently up at the Ninth Circuit. That we're motions to unstay the case we're waiting for those to be decided. So right now it's just sitting kind of in limbo. It was put to the side, waiting on the Supreme Court decision that we were talking about earlier. And we'll see what happens with that. We just filed a lawsuit in New York against the SAFE Act. We just filed a lawsuit against New Jersey against their assault weapons ban. There are a couple of cases that we have filed or are going to be filing challenging magazine capacity restrictions. So all of these things are things that we've looked at and decided like, yes, now is a good time, or alternatively was part of our strategic litigation plan for, common arms and common use. I think there's 5 states that had some form of an assault weapons ban off the top of my head. And so, while the rest of the country has access to these arms, it's not fair to restrict these rosters, California roster, the Massachusetts roster, or other challenges that we have going on too. So there's plenty of stuff, and I'm sure it's just going to continue because there's no shortage of things to challenge.
Well, I just want to say that for people that are watching this, and obviously they care about this topic, now is really the time. I do believe we have a little bit of momentum. We meaning like people that are advocates for Second Amendment, right? I think there's a little bit of momentum right now. Now is the time to push, to really kind of donate some money or get involved or find out how else you can contribute. If not now, certainly not while our back's against the wall. Let's attack. For once, let's fucking attack. Instead of trying to defend, we're on the attack. Let's fund this thing. Let's do it,
Was it offense is the best defense?
No, dude, I agree. Aren't you tired of playing defense, dude? Always begging for the little morsel of shit we have left. Like, no, let's go fucking attack.
And the problem too is, like, I think most of us know they've been a lot more blunt especially with what they're doing now. But it's been like a slow chisel away, right? Because you can't just come out and say, hey, no one can own an AR. But what you start to do is you start to layer on, and then it's ounces make pounds, and then the fucking camel's back breaks. And that's the problem. A lot of people, when, at least in this is just my subjective opinion, but when they're like, well, we have to make compromise. I hear that all the time. Like, what? Why? It's been that there was compromise. There's been compromise
what did
throughout.
We get in return, by the way?
Yeah, and there's no compromise on the other side. So why are you, especially some people in our community, even just like, well, give them a little bit, they'll happy. No, you give a kid sugar, it wants more sugar. You tell the kid you're eating fucking your vegetables, like that, straight up. Like I don't, I hope that, and this is my belief is that sometimes the gun community, it's like kind of like goes against itself. And it's like we have to stand united around things like FPC and fund them and support them. I don't care if you have a little disagreement with something, but there's real consequences if with inaction. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, talk about FPC in more of a public light. So hopefully some of the people that haven't heard about the organization can go out there and support and at least follow and educate themselves. Because I learned a lot already just between you and Mike on the show. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, I think as to your point of compromise happened already.
Yeah.
That was when they passed the Bill of Rights. It was... No, I mean, they considered this. These were all things that they had considered at the time that they adopted the Bill of Rights. And they said that, these are things that we're willing to live with as a country. And so that compromise already happened. Ever since then, it's been an infringement. And what we're working to do is actively working to restore. I use restore very very consciously. A lot of people say, well, we defend the Second Amendment. Well, defend means that, you're just constantly trying to prevent the next infringement. We're actively looking to restore it back to that historical understanding of the right.
Powerful statement right there.
No, it is, and it's accurate. So for anybody that's familiar with Sons of Liberty, we're extremely outspoken as a gun manufacturer. We're out there doing this stuff. I travel to the different states to try. If we're supporting these guys, if we believe in them, I mean, I think that says a lot. We're pretty staunch, and these guys are our heroes, man. So, and
also, I'll just shamelessly plug if you need one of the dopest ARs ever. Mike's got you. I'm going to buy mine this afternoon. Been waiting for a while for it. He put me on the waiting list, guys. How messed up is that? He's like, hey, can I buy a gun? He was like, yeah, I'll be ready in 18 months. Like, oh, thanks.
There you go. Is
that the bro timeline? He's, geez, Louise, man. No, it was great, and thank you guys. I didn't think you were down there, but I was invited down to the San Diego little charity banquet thing. That was fun time. I got a new Glock, but I think it's probably California legal. I don't even know what they do down there. So,
it's a bolt action Glock.
It's a bolt action Glock. Yeah. Well, cool. I think you kind of said everywhere they can find you, but
I can give that again if you want.
Yeah. Please. Sure. I mean, I truly believe in what you guys are doing. And thank you. And I hope to work with you guys in the future a lot more. So
yeah, well, we would certainly enjoy that, and we appreciate everything you're doing to help spread awareness. So as far as the coalition side of things, the C4 gun policy on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can Google Firearms Policy Coalition. The website's firearmspolicy.org. If you're interested in seeing any of the legal stuff we're doing, FPC Law, so Frank Papa Charlie Law.org. It'll bring you to our case page. You can go, you can click on the cases, you can see the filing, so you can actually see the work we're doing, that we're not just telling you we're doing stuff. You can go check.
Awesome.
The foundation is FPCActionFoundation.org. Like I said, separate entity. That's where the law center's headed.
And also for people, a lot of that is a nonprofit on that side of the house.
C3, yeah.
It's a C3. So if certain people, tax liability, however they do it, just consider that as one of your things you can support.
Yep. And if anybody has any additional questions or wants information about the law center, stuff like that, we're obviously happy to talk to people.
Slick. All right, last one for us today. Because why is it that no one talks about mental health? I mean, we do, but
it's probably because it's a really complicated problem. I think people like very simple solutions, very simple sound bites. And if you talk about mental health, that's a real problem, and it requires some kind of very nuanced and complicated solution. And that's very hard for people that are intellectually lazy. That's your answer.
I think that's actually, I'm not sure I could give a better answer than that. I think
I was prepping something in my mind. And I don't want to say it anymore.
Well, there's no easy answer to the problem, and I think if you're asking the question in terms of specifically firearms related stuff, well, just ban guns is a far simpler solution than now we actually have to delve into people's psyches and try to understand complex things as to why people are the way they are and whether there's treatments and how do we do X, Y, Z.
Maybe Mike and I can get just pieces of paper and we go ban guns, bad guy get guns, good guy don't. Maybe that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's also too, I'm just ranting at this point, but criminals find a way. We've seen it even in places like the Japanese prime minister just got, murdered.
This homemade
with
shotgun,
a homemade electric shotgun. I mean, evil finds a way, and the only way to thwart evil is with violent goodness. I truly believe that. I've been to war, so I can say that. And I wish a lot more people were willing to accept that there is evil in the world. There's a lot of it, and we have to stand together unified and protect ourselves and our families and be present with their families. Because, hey, that's another thing with mental health right there for me. It's like, where the fuck are the parents? You know?
Yeah.
My God. Anyways. Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you, Mike.
Thanks for having me, man. I'd love coming and hanging out with you guys.
Can you give you a tour of the shop after this?
Oh, dude, let's go.
I've never already been there, but
let's go.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks, FCC.